Have you ever wondered why the world feels so heavy when you betray yourself? A man may wear the mask of confidence. A woman may adorn herself with smiles, but beneath it all, there is a quiet corrosion that eats away at the soul when one's life is lived in borrowed voices. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. To live against your nature is to fracture the very ground upon which your being stands. Authenticity is not a luxury, it is survival. And every day you compromise it, you lose a little more of your own reflection. Seneca once spoke of the tragedy of wasting life not in years lost, but in life unlived. The truth he carried was sharper than any sword. A man who bends to the applause of others' lives as a shadow, never as substance. You can feel it too, the aching dissonance between who you are in silence and who you are when the world demands performance. That fracture is not harmless. It multiplies, echoing through your relationships, your choices, and the hollow ache you carry at night. To live your truth is not a slogan. It is the battlefield where the soul fights for its right to exist. In Jungian language, this fracture creates the shadow. All that you repress, the wildness, the anger, the tenderness, the desire for freedom, goes underground. And yet, it does not stay quiet. It returns in dreams, in compulsions, in self-sabotage, in sudden outbursts you cannot explain. You may think you are polite, composed, rational, but the parts of you denied their voice will rise like neglected gods, demanding sacrifice. Stoicism teaches not to suppress them, but to look them in the eye, to walk calmly into the chaos within and claim dominion over it. For what is authenticity, if not the integration of shadow and light? To live unapologetically is not to be reckless. It is to be disciplined enough to stand where you are unmoved by the winds of approval or rejection. Epictetus warned of the chains forged, not by iron, but by opinion. If another's praise makes you proud, their scorn will make you crumble. And so you must ask yourself, whose voice commands your choices? The woman who bends her spirit to please others becomes a ghost in her own home. The man who silences his truth for fear of judgment grows brittle, afraid to move lest the mask shatter. And yet, every fiber of your being knows this is not why you were born. Look around. The world will reward conformity, but it will never honor your soul for betraying itself. You already know this. Think of the times you said yes when your chest screamed no, the times you smiled while something inside you withered. That is the price of abandoning your truth. The Stoics called it slavery, not of the body, but of the spirit. For what use is freedom in the marketplace if you remain imprisoned within your own skin? And so the question emerges, what does it mean to live your truth? It is not indulgence, not chaos, not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is to align your life so closely with your inner being that there is no split between thought and action, no fracture between desire and discipline. It is the silence of a man whose eyes are steady when storms roar. It is the calm of a woman who does not beg to be chosen because she already stands rooted in her own worth. This is the authenticity the Stoics sought, not the noisy declaration of the self, but the quiet integrity of one who cannot be bought, flattered, or broken. And yet, to stand this way demands sacrifice. You will lose the shallow approval of many. You will feel the sting of isolation when you no longer bend to roles written for you by others. But understand this, that loneliness is not exile. It is the rite of passage for the soul's return. For in that silence you discover a truth few dare to touch, that your worth has never belonged to another's hands. The applause was always borrowed. The shame was never yours to carry. Only when you let both go can you feel the unshakable ground beneath your feet. So ask yourself right now, whose life are you living? Whose script are you reciting each day? The time will come when death knocks, and the question will not be whether others approved, but whether you were true. Remember this: the Stoics did not live to please. They lived to align with nature, with reason, with the deeper pulse that cannot be faked. You too must decide. Will you keep betraying the whisper inside you, or will you finally stand as the unmasked, untamed, unshakable self you were born to be? The path toward authenticity is not smooth. It is carved through the stone of resistance, of misunderstanding, of fear. Those who dare to stand in their truth become unsettling to those still bound by masks. When you refuse to play the roles that others project upon you, you shine a mirror on their own disguises, and many will recoil from it. But remember, this rejection is not evidence of failure. It is proof that you are no longer chained to the theater of false approval. In Stoic thought, truth is not a concept to be debated. It is a way of being. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, you may encounter liars, flatterers, the arrogant, the treacherous, and yet none of these are reasons to abandon your own integrity. Here lies the paradox. The more unshakable you become, the more the world tests your resolve. Authenticity demands you stand in stillness while chaos swirls, that you remain whole even when others attempt to fracture you with blame or praise alike. Modern psychology speaks of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Jung saw it as the great task of a lifetime to integrate the fractured pieces of the self into one coherent soul. For most, this path remains avoided because it demands confrontation with shadow, with wounds long hidden. To live one's truth requires facing the parts of you that you most fear, the rage you deny, the tenderness you bury, the voice you were taught to silence. Only when these exiled parts are welcomed home can you stand as one being, no longer performing, no longer apologizing for the space you occupy. And here, Stoicism offers a discipline to act not for applause, not for validation, but for the harmony of your own reason and nature. To live truthfully is to walk into a room and no longer seek the gaze of others to grant you existence. It is to eat, to love, to speak, not as performance but as expression of inner alignment. Think of the strength in this. Imagine what it means to look into the eyes of a critic and feel nothing but calm, because their opinion does not create you. Imagine what it means to stand before temptation, before manipulation, before demand, and remain unmoved because you are already whole. The cost of authenticity, however, is exile from the easy comforts of conformity. Friends may drift, lovers may depart, society may label you difficult, cold, or rebellious. Yet those who remain, those drawn not to your mask but to your essence, become the true companions of your soul. Better to be alone in truth than surrounded in deceit. The Stoics knew this loneliness, and they wore it as armor, because they understood that virtue is often solitary before it becomes legendary. And let us speak directly. If you continue to live for others, you will spend your life a beggar, waiting for scraps of acceptance, forever dancing for coins of approval that will never satisfy your hunger. But if you turn inward, if you dare to live in unapologetic authenticity, you will discover that the feast was always within you, that your worth does not rise and fall with the shifting tides of attention, that the applause, once so intoxicating, becomes hollow compared to the steady drumbeat of your own conscience. So you must choose. Will you wear the mask until death, or will you rip it away and let the world see the raw, unpolished, undeniable truth of your being? Know this: the moment you do, you will feel fear. But that fear is only the old self dying. On the other side of it lies the liberation you have sought all along. It will not be handed to you by others. It must be claimed by your own hands, your own voice, your own unshakable discipline. To live truthfully is to live dangerously, not in the sense of reckless abandon, but in the courage it takes to stand unarmored before the world. For every mask discarded, there is a risk. Every time you refuse to bend to the expectations of others, you threaten their fragile constructs. Yet this is the mark of authentic existence: to be willing to endure the weight of disapproval rather than bear the heavier burden of self-betrayal. The Stoics were not men and women who sought comfort. They sought clarity. They chose the sharp edge of truth over the velvet cage of illusion. And in this choice, they found a freedom no empire could confiscate, for the one who is true to himself is beyond the reach of coercion. What can you take from a man who no longer depends on your approval? What can you threaten a woman with when she no longer fears being misunderstood? This is the power of the authentic life. It renders you untouchable, not because the world changes, but because your center no longer wavers. Jung would say the authentic being is born when the persona shatters. The persona is the mask, the costume you wear to satisfy the demands of the tribe. At first, it feels necessary, an armor against rejection. But over time, it suffocates the soul. Individuation begins when you tear it away and face the rawness underneath. This is not an easy path. To expose your truth feels like exposure to the elements, like walking naked into a storm. Yet in that storm lies transformation. For when the winds rage and the rain lashes, you discover that you do not dissolve, you endure. And endurance births strength, the kind no false identity could ever provide. Consider this: every great figure of history who embodied truth, whether a philosopher, a warrior, a poet, was at some point deemed unacceptable. Their authenticity threatened the order of the day, and yet they refused to bend. Their names endure not because they fit in, but because they chose not to. Authenticity is remembered. Conformity is forgotten. Ask yourself which path you walk. Will your story be one of quiet compliance, buried beneath the weight of other people's expectations? Or will it be a story carved by your own hand, unrepentant and unrepeatable? And let us speak to the heart of you now. You already know where you have betrayed yourself. You know the conversations where you stayed silent when your truth was burning to be spoken. You know the relationships where you diminished yourself so another could feel larger. You know the places where you hid your light because you feared its brilliance would make others turn away. These are not small betrayals. They are wounds, and every wound unattended becomes infection. To live authentically is to clean them, even if it stings, even if it bleeds. Better to endure the sharpness of truth than the slow rot of dishonesty. The Stoic path demands you detach from what is not yours. Others praise, not yours. Others blame, not yours. Their perception of you is their burden, not your essence. The moment you grasp this, a great weight falls away. You cease being a puppet of reputation and begin walking as a sovereign soul. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. You no longer live to be liked, you live to be true. And in that truth, paradoxically, you become the rarest kind of person. Trustworthy, grounded, whole. The world will call you stubborn, even cold, But you will know the truth. You are free. And freedom is never warm in its beginning. It chills you, isolates you, demands more than you thought you could give. Yet as time passes, that coldness becomes clarity, and clarity becomes peace. There is no greater wealth than to walk unafraid of being misunderstood. There is no higher honor than to live unashamed of your essence. So take this seriously. Your time is short. Death waits for no apology, no performance, no explanation. It waits only to ask, were you true? If you cannot answer yes, then what have you lived for? To live for others' opinions is to die without having lived. To live in your truth is to die complete. And that choice lies before you, here and now. Authenticity is a confrontation with fear itself. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of standing alone in a crowded room with no familiar hand to cling to. And yet, beneath that fear is the iron truth that the soul has always whispered. You were not born to be a copy. You were not made to echo the lives of others. The weight you feel is not destiny. It is the burden of imitation. When you step into your truth, that weight lifts, and though the world may turn against you, your spirit breathes freely for the first time. The Stoics spoke of aligning with nature, and modern psychology would call it alignment with the authentic self. Both point to the same reality. A life lived against your own nature is a life of illness, while a life lived in harmony with it brings peace, even amid storms. To deny who you are is to exile yourself from your own kingdom, to serve as a stranger in your own house. How many people live this way, exiled within themselves, their every action an apology, their every word a negotiation for acceptance? Such lives are not lived, they are endured. Jung warned of the false self, the persona that feeds on approval, but starves the soul. When you wear it too long, you forget the shape of your own face. The journey back requires stripping layer after layer until only essence remains. This process hurts, for every layer was once protection. Yet those layers also suffocated you, kept you small, restrained the fire of your being. To shed them is painful, but it is also holy. Each mask removed is a prayer, whispered to the gods of truth. I will no longer live in exile. Imagine what happens when you stand wholly in yourself. You become unsettling, even radiant. Some will resent you, for you remind them of what they have denied in themselves. Others will be drawn to you, intoxicated by the freedom you embody. And within yourself, something shifts. No more begging to be seen, no more contorting to fit a mold, no more bargaining for the right to exist. You no longer live like a guest in your own life. You become its master. But mastery is not arrogance. It is the quiet calm of one who knows his place in the order of things. It is the serenity of a woman who walks into a room and carries herself without apology. It is the discipline of a man who acts not for applause, not for fear, but from the rootedness of principle. Such mastery cannot be faked. It is born only through the fire of self-confrontation, through the nights of silence where you stare into the abyss of your own compromises and vow to betray yourself no longer. This is what it means to embody Stoic wisdom in the modern age. Not to become numb, but to become unshakable. Not to suppress, but to integrate. Not to armor yourself against life, but to walk through it as one already whole. Your truth is not loud. It does not scream for attention. It simply stands, immovable, undeniable, unashamed. The man who finds it becomes unbreakable. The woman who claims it becomes untouchable. Together, they rise not above others, but above their own former chains. So hear this as challenge. Stop rehearsing the role that was written for you by others. Step off the stage. The audience will jeer. They will whisper. They will turn away. Let them. For outside the theater lies the real world, waiting for the unmasked version of you, the only version that was ever meant to live. Authenticity demands not only the courage to stand, but the discipline to remain standing. For many can rise in moments of passion, declaring boldly that they will no longer betray themselves. But few can sustain that fire when the nights grow quiet and the temptations of conformity creep back in. True authenticity is not a single act of defiance. It is a daily practice, a constant return to the center of your being when the world tries to pull you away. The Stoics understood this as the training of the soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote of returning again and again to the citadel within, a place that no enemy could invade, no crowd could touch. That citadel is your truth. It is not built overnight. It is built each time you say no to what fractures you, each time you refuse to bend your spine for shallow approval, each time you walk away from what demands you betray yourself. This repetition forges strength, until one day you discover that nothing outside can move the ground beneath your feet. Modern psychology mirrors this wisdom. Self-authenticity is not a trait given at birth. It is a muscle, developed through the repeated act of alignment. Every time you resist the pull of falsehood, you strengthen the neural pathways of integrity. Every time you choose congruence over compliance, you carve deeper grooves of authenticity into the mind. And just as with any training, the early stages are painful. You tremble, you doubt, you fear abandonment. Yet pain is not a signal to stop. It is the evidence of growth. But know this: authenticity is not license for cruelty. It is not the reckless shouting of every impulse, nor the indulgence of every desire. Stoicism warns against confusing freedom with chaos. To be authentic is to be in harmony with reason, to live not enslaved by passions, but guided by a deeper order. Your truth must be disciplined, sharpened, integrated. The world does not need more noise. It needs more souls who embody the quiet strength of wholeness. And what does that look like? It looks like the man who no longer explains his worth, because his presence alone testifies to it. It looks like the woman who does not shrink her light to soothe fragile egos, but allows it to burn steadily, drawing those who can endure its warmth and blinding those who cannot. It looks like the human being who, even when misunderstood, even when mocked, even when abandoned, does not collapse into self-betrayal, but remains steady, anchored in something unshakable. There is power in this steadiness, power that cannot be taken because it was never borrowed. When you no longer rely on others to define your essence, you move through the world differently. You become difficult to manipulate, impossible to enslave, resistant to the tides of opinion that sweep the masses into conformity. The authentic man or woman is feared by some, admired by others, but above all, untouchable in their sovereignty. And so the invitation remains before you. Will you return to the citadel within, again and again, until it is unbreakable? Will you commit to the discipline of alignment, the training of the soul, the daily refusal to fracture yourself for applause? Understand this: each small act of authenticity compounds. Each honest word spoken, each mask removed, each boundary drawn, these are the bricks that build the fortress of your truth. You must decide if you will continue as a guest in your own life, or if you will claim ownership of it. No one can make this decision for you. Not the crowd, not your family, not your lovers, not your enemies. only you can declare, I will no longer live divided. I will no longer bend. I will no longer betray. From this moment forward, I will live only in truth. The struggle of authenticity is not fought once. It is fought every day, in the quiet corners where no one is watching. It is fought in the moments when compromise whispers like a seductive voice, promising comfort if you only bend, if you only stay silent, if you only wear the mask one more time. And yet every small surrender deepens the fracture within. A soul divided against itself cannot stand. The Stoics knew this battle intimately. They taught that discipline is not merely restraint, but alignment with truth. Seneca wrote that the greatest slavery is to be enslaved by the crowd, to live for their cheers and die by their rejection. To live authentically is to unshackle yourself from this slavery, to rise each morning and declare, I belong to myself. Even if the world scorns me, even if I walk alone, I remain sovereign. In modern psychology, this is the foundation of self-worth, not the fragile worth that wavers with external validation, but the deeper worth that emerges when you embody congruence, when your words, actions, and values flow as one current. People sense this congruence. It is why some command respect without demanding it, why their presence fills a room without raising their voice. They are not louder than others. They are whole. But to reach this wholeness, you must confront the illusions that bind you. The illusion that you must always be agreeable. The illusion that your value depends on being chosen. The illusion that love, respect, and belonging can be earned only by contorting yourself. These illusions are chains, and each time you live by them, you hand the key of your existence to someone else. Break them, and you reclaim yourself, not as performance, but as essence. The Stoic path is not about cold detachment. It is about fierce clarity. It is about seeing reality as it is, not as the ego or fear demands. When you strip away illusion, what remains is not weakness, but strength. You are no longer intoxicated by praise, no longer crippled by criticism, no longer baited by the fleeting currents of opinion. You stand as a mountain, unmoving, unbought, unbroken, and this strength radiates outward. When you live authentically, you give silent permission for others to do the same. You become a mirror that reflects not what people want to see, but what they are. Some will hate you for it, unable to bear the truth of their own disguise. Others will gravitate toward you, drawn by the rare courage you embody. This is how authenticity reshapes the world, not by loud rebellion, but by the steady fire of one life lived without apology. Consider this. The moments you remember most vividly are not the times you fit in, but the times you dared to stand apart. Those memories still pulse with life because they were real. They were yours. And the truth is, your entire existence is meant to be lived in that pulse, not occasionally, but always. To settle for less is to commit a slow form of death. So the challenge before you is not whether you can live your truth once, in some heroic burst of defiance. The challenge is whether you will live it daily, in the small choices, the subtle refusals, the hidden moments where no one applauds you. That is where authenticity is forged, and that is where your soul either rises or withers. You must decide now. Will you return to the crowd, or will you take the narrow path, the harder path, the path of wholeness? For the crowd will always tempt you back with comfort, but comfort is not peace. Peace is the reward of truth, and truth is the task of the brave. Authenticity is not only the liberation of the self, It is the purification of the soul. For when you live in truth, you begin to burn away everything that was never yours. The roles inherited, the masks imposed, the lies repeated. So often, they felt like home. To stand unapologetically in your essence is to undergo a kind of death and rebirth. The old self, stitched together from the threads of others' expectations, must wither, and from its ashes rises a new self, sharper, clearer, whole. The Stoics understood this death as necessary. They urged the daily practice of memento mori. Remember that you must die, not as morbid reflection, but as a reminder that time is short and truth cannot wait. Every day lived in falsehood is a day lost forever. Every compromise of your soul is a theft against the only life you will ever have. When you live authentically, you honor the fleeting nature of existence. You refuse to waste it in masquerades. Modern psychology echoes this with the language of trauma and healing. To live untrue is to continually wound yourself, to relive the abandonment of the child who was told, "You are too much," or "You are not enough." Authenticity is the medicine to those wounds. It is the refusal to abandon yourself again, even if the whole world repeats those words. It is to look into the mirror of your soul and say, "I am both enough and too much, and I will not apologize for either." But this rebirth does not grant immunity from pain. Pain remains, but it transforms. Instead of the dull ache of compromise, you feel the sharp sting of courage. Instead of the silent erosion of the self, you endure the visible trials of honesty. This is the noble pain, the pain that purifies, the pain that makes you strong. The Stoics wore it as armor, for they knew that suffering endured in truth is not destruction. It is transformation. Consider the weight that lifts when you no longer seek to explain yourself to every critic. Consider the freedom when you stop bending for approval, when your choices no longer revolve around how you will be perceived. That freedom is intoxicating, but it is also sobering. For once you taste it, you realize how enslaved you once were, and you vow never to return to those chains. Authenticity will change the way you love. No longer will you beg for validation, disguised as affection. No longer will you perform to earn approval. Instead, you will stand as you are and allow love to find you there, or not. The woman who knows her truth does not chase. She chooses. The man who lives in alignment does not plead. He simply offers presence, and it is enough. This kind of love is rare because it cannot be manipulated. It cannot be bought. It requires two whole beings, not two fractured halves. Authenticity will change the way you work. You will no longer measure success by the noise of recognition, but by the quiet satisfaction of integrity. The task will become the reward, the process, the teacher. Praise will become irrelevant because the deepest honor will come from the knowledge that you did not betray yourself in pursuit of it. This is the unshakable ground the Stoics walked upon, to act rightly, regardless of whether anyone noticed. And authenticity will change the way you meet death. For when the final moment comes, you will not tremble with regret that you lived a borrowed life. You will stand with calm, knowing you spoke what was yours to speak, loved as was yours to love, stood as was yours to stand. Death is no terror to the authentic. It is simply the closing of a book written in truth. So take this with you. Every act of authenticity, no matter how small, is a declaration of sovereignty. Every truth spoken, every boundary kept, every mask discarded, these are victories of the soul. Collect enough of them, and you become unbreakable. you become whole. And no empire, no critic, no rejection, no betrayal can ever take that from you.